By mid-1942, the Axis military machine controlled more territory than almost any empire in human history. German and Japanese forces were expanding with a speed and aggression that left the Allies reeling, seemingly unable to hold their momentum. This map illustrates the three critical pressure points where the Allies were closest to breaking. In the Pacific, Japan planned to remain to the U.S. Navy Midway. In North Africa, German tanks were driving toward the Suez Canal and Britain's oil supply. And in the Soviet Union, German divisions pushed toward the Volga River at Stalingrad to cripple Soviet industry. The margin for error was entirely gone. If Allied forces failed to hold even one of these three positions, the Axis would secure resources and strategic territory that could make them impossible to defeat. Allied commanders struggled to counter a military style built on rapid strikes and the constant element of surprise. The 𝗧𝗪𝗏, the Axis advance, forced the Allies into reactive defensive posture, thus everything the war. The rapid fashion moved faster the systems need to sustain. And thanks to 6 months, the Allies began to find and leverage structural failures in the neck rise, applying the glyces and ions over surprise and Axis commands fail over kinds. The first collapse happened in the Pacific. 6 months after Pearl Harbor, Japanese commanders prepared another massive strike. They intended to invade the small atoll of Midway to draw out and sink the remaining American aircraft carriers. But the Japanese offensive relied on a level of secrecy they no longer possessed. Deep inside American naval intelligence, cryptographers quietly intercepted and deciphered Japan's naval codes. The U.S. Navy needed the exact target and the tantal. Instead of sailing into a Japanese ambush, the American fleet repositioned its own forces to wait for the attackers. On June 4, 1942, that trap snapped shut. American dive bombers dropped out of the clouds, catching the Japanese carrier fleet exactly when it was most exposed. In a matter of minutes, 4 of Japan's heavy carriers were reduced to burning wrecks, doomed flightbacks that were heavily packed with fueled and armed aircraft. By neutralizing Japan's primary technical advantage, surprise, the United States crippled the Japanese carrier force. Japan never again held the air. The second Fletcher appeared in the desert South Africa. During General Erwin had spent 2 years executing piling the tank ventons, prime red versus back, and dashing dangerously close to the Val Suez Canal. As the span shows, Rommel's speed created a severe logistical problem. His supply lines were now stretched thin across hundreds of miles of brutal desert, leaving his armor chronically short of fuel and ammunition. British forces, now under General Bernard Montgomery, took the exact opposite approach. Rather than matching Rommel's mobility, Montgomery halted his retreat at Alamein and steadily stockpiled massive amounts of infantry, tanks, and shuttles. In late October 1942, Montgomery unleashed that stockpile. The British opened the Battle of Alamein with a deafening artillery barrage, crushing undersupplied German positions under massive shell fire, sending in the air. Rommel's exhausted forces were eventually forced into a retreat. Alamein demonstrated a hard military mobile aggressive in break when they hit a well-supplied wall of attrition warfare. The third and most devastating collapse occurred in the Soviet Union. The city of Stalingrad was a key industrial target, but it also bore the name of Joseph Stalin, making its capture a deeply personal, symbolic obsession for Adolf Hitler. To take the city, German forces had to abandon their open-field maneuvers for close-quarters urban combat. Soldiers fought floor by floor, room by room. In a grinding struggle the Germans grimly called Rattenkrieg, the War of Rats. In the dense rebel, German tanks entirely lost their advantage. By January 1942, German infantry had bled themselves dry, taking roughly 90% of the city. To maintain the internal pressure, they stripped their ranks, leaving those defensive positions guarded by weaker, under-equipped forces. Looking at this deployment, the Soviet command saw their opportunity. Rather than feeding more men into the center of the city, they launched Operation Uranus, a massive counteroffensive targeting those exposed flanks. The Soviet panzers rapidly drove through the rear, closing the trap and surrounding over 250,000 Axis soldiers, cutting their supply lines just as the brutal Russian winter set in. A breakout was still mechanically possible, but Hitler strictly ordered his trapped army to hold its ground and fight to the last man. Denied the ability to retreat, the encircled forces were slowly destroyed from the inside by starvation, constant attacks, and frostbite. What remained of the German army finally surrendered in February 1943. A commanding battlefield advantage had been thrown away by strategic arrogance, breaking back a German army in the worst defeat the Nazi war 𝗪𝗪𝗪, Alamein, Stalingrad. These three massive, distinct victories occurred on 3 different continents within a span of just a few months. The traits that enabled early Axis conquest, the reliance on speed, secrecy, and unrelenting aggression, eventually produced the very vulnerabilities that crippled them. Across 3 separate theaters, the momentum of the Axis war machine simply ran out of room. The momentum broke Lombley. From this point forward, the Axis military would no longer advance. Instead, they would bleed themselves white trying to defend the territory they had already taken. Winston Churchill looked at the culmination of these battles and offered a silver assessment. It was not the end of the war, he nodded. It was perhaps the end of the being. The Axis expansion is haunted, but liberating occupied Europe required a completely different kind of warfare. The Allies now had to organize a colossal buildup of troops, weapons, and specialized material. The focus shifted entirely to the logistics of taking territory back, setting the stage for the largest, most complex seaborne invasion in human history.